Good evening, YouTube viewers. Obviously, I haven't posted in a while, but this New York Times op-ed about President Trump has sort of made me want to cover it in some detail. So that's what I'm going to do here. Let's see. This person gets off to quite an interesting start. Opening sentence. President Trump is facing a test to his presidency unlike any faced by a modern American leader. Right off the bat, you know that's propagandist bullshit. Obviously, every president, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, George Bush, Ronald Reagan, all of these presidents had bitter opposition. Bill Clinton was impeached, obviously, had lots of hearings and whatnot going on about his lying under oath and all of that stuff. Millions upon millions, half the country hated Barack Obama. I was one of them. He bitterly divided the country over on racial and economic lines. Always the race baiting that got many police officers murdered directly on the head of Barack Obama. I would say that he was facing quite a test of opposition. So on the opening sentence of this op-ed just shows what a propagandist this is. It's really wishful thinking. It's not the truth in any way, shape, or form. Moving on. It's not just that the special counsel looms large. You can't even continue with much of this because you have to stop at each particular point. The special counsel is not looming large. Everybody knows, who understands or cares about the Constitution, that the special counsel is completely unconstitutional. Everybody in the United States has a constitutional right against unreasonable searches or seizures or things like that. So you want to, when you're an American citizen, before you're investigated, there has to be some suggestion that there is a crime. As of yet, there has been no suggestion that President Trump has committed any definable crime. What is the act? What is the law? What is the regulation that President Trump is supposed to have broken? Well, that's not important. We just get to comb through with millions of taxpayer dollars anything that he might have done, so that in case we might happen upon a crime. That's not constitutional. Robert Mueller is not looming large. They're just playing some charades over there. Okay, let's continue on with this. Or that the country is bitterly divided over Mr. Trump's leadership. Again, this is just leading the witness. Nobody's divided over his leadership as much as we're divided over the fact that there are leftists and there are people who care about freedom. Of course, we're divided along those lines. Okay. Or even that his party might well lose to the House. No, let's start that over. Or even that his party might well lose the House to an opposition hell-bent on his downfall. Again, this is wishful thinking. It's propagandist behavior. It really has nothing to do with communicating any valuable information here. What he's talking about, or she is talking about, is the fact that an election is coming up. Okay, an election's coming up. You can win or lose an election. There are people that are hell-bent on his downfall. There's no doubt about that, but who cares? That's just common knowledge. It goes without saying. Moving on. The dilemma, which he does not fully grasp, is that many of the senior officials in his own administration are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. Well, first of all, is this person in Trump's head? Does he know that he does not fully grasp that? It seems to me that it's pretty clear to President Trump and to any Trump supporter that there are many people who are working diligently to frustrate his agenda. The way that it's phrased, of course, is that it's senior officials in his own administration who are doing this working. I don't believe it. We already know from the outset that whoever is writing this, whoever wrote this is a liar. So why would we trust that it's coming from inside? Frankly, so far, I only need to go this far before I don't believe that this has come from inside the White House. I don't think that any White House official, even those who vehemently disagree with President Trump would have written this. It just seems like a propagandist ploy. We see them all the time. Why would this be any different? This person says, I would know. I'm one of them. Bullshit. That's all I have to say right off the bat. All the context that I've read so far is all I need to know, that this person is full of shit. This is coming from, might as well be coming from Russia. This is a good example of some Russian propaganda. It's designed to worm its way in and try to sow division among people who might be working to better this country. So let's move on. To be clear, ours is not the popular resistance of the left. We want the administration to succeed and think that many of his policies have already made America safer and more prosperous. Again, this is bullshit. You're not clear. Yours is the popular resistance of the left. This is just more leftist propaganda. They're trying to cleverly position themselves as someone who is sympathetic to parts of the administration's policies. Okay, let's move on. But we believe our first duty is to this country. And the president continues to act in a manner that is detrimental to the health of our republic. Yeah, that's why unemployment is at record lows for blacks and Hispanics and all of these groups. It's why there's optimism finally that someone might be able to keep their money without Barack Obama reaching into their pocket and demonizing making any kind of profit whatsoever. You didn't build that. What a loser. Okay, let's move on. That is why many Trump appointees have vowed to do what we can to preserve our democratic institutions while thwarting Mr. Trump's more misguided impulses until he is out of office. First of all, nobody who cares about or understands the Constitution speaks about democracy or democratic institutions fondly. Democracy is the worst form of fascism. At least with a dictator, you have some probability of enlightened and benevolent leadership. With a democracy, you're ruled by average minds by definition. Patriots don't revere democracy. Patriots understand that democracy is a necessary evil that's used in a very limited function in the United States. The Constitution is what's important in the United States. That is the rights of individuals against the whims of the average, of the democratic, of the mob. Okay, let's move on. The root of the problem is the president's amorality, as opposed to the rest of us. President Trump is amoral, but the rest of us are just angels. The person writing this obviously is just on a pedestal up on high and has no faults whatsoever. So he can sit back there and judge the president on his morality. Let's move ahead. Anyone who works with him knows he is not moored to any discernible first principles that guide his decision making. Really, let's see, he seems to be moored to the principle that getting rid of regulations and that are unnecessary and just confiscatory taxation will unleash the economy. That's a principle, and it seems to have guided his decision making that has turned the economy around in record time. Again, this is just bullshit. It's not moored to any fact what this person's saying. Let's move ahead. Although he was elected as a Republican, the president shows little affinity for ideals long espoused by conservatives. Free minds, free markets, and free people. At best, he has invoked these ideals in scripted settings. At worst, he's attacked them outright. Well, again, this is just absolute nonsense. Here's a person that talks about democracy, democratic institutions. How are those moored to first principles? In a democracy, whatever the average mind say, whatever the mob says is what everyone is to be governed by. regardless of any first principle. Again, I think Trump has shown in his actions that the principles he believes in can be used to show real change in people's lives in terms of the economy. So once again, this is just a line of reasoning espoused by this propagandist that just doesn't match, it doesn't comport with what we see as Americans on a daily basis. Let's move ahead. In addition to his mass marketing of the notion that the press is the enemy of the people, okay, this is an outright lie. He says that fake news is the enemy of the people. The New York Times, this is a perfect example, this op-ed, the enemy of the people. CNN, they're propagandists, they're liars, they are not for the ideals underlying the Constitution, which is individual liberty. If you're for threatening people with murder, if they don't work for free to fund social experiments, then you're not for America. So I think the American people who elected Donald Trump know the difference between these propagandists and who's really for America, let's say. Yeah, his mass marketing of the notion the press is the enemy of the people. First of all, that's obvious. It's obvious to anybody who cares about freedom that the leftist press, which is 90% of it, they are the enemy of the people. That's a fact. Okay, this says, in addition to that, President Trump's impulses are generally anti-trade and anti-democratic. Okay, anti-trade. Well, we seem to be trading up storm. He seems to be working out trade agreements that are in the favor of the United States rather than letting us get walked all over, or shipping train loads and C-130s packed with pallets of cash to, let's face it, leftists more than Muslims. That's really what they are, is leftist fascists in Iran. Let's see. Oh, and anti-democratic. Generally anti-trade and anti-democratic. Once again, if he's anti-democratic, he's pro-Constitution, because the Constitution is anti-democratic. Okay, moving ahead. Don't get me wrong. There are bright spots that the near ceaseless negative coverage of the administration fails to capture. Effective deregulation, historic tax reform, a more robust military, and more. Okay, well, here's just a person trying to throw you off the trail. These are things that can't be ignored. Everybody with a functioning frontal lobe understands that these things have improved the economy in ways that just cannot be ignored. So here's a person that has to try to throw you off the trail that this is just a leftist propagandist. But you can see right through it. This person recognizes these facts. And this is just an Ellsworth Toohey character from The Fountainhead. Person who understands what he or she is trying to do here. And that's just gaslight. Let's move ahead. But these successes have come despite, not because of, the president's leadership style, which is impetuous, adversarial, petty, and ineffective. Ineffective, that's an interesting thing to say about his leadership style. Those of us who have been alive for a few presidents know that one thing that President Trump has not been is ineffective. We've seen him accomplish what we could not imagine would be accomplished in such a short period of time. We see economic growth that's through the roof after 8 years of Obama's just wet blanket on the economy. And you can say what you want about it. You may not like it. You may think it's impetuous. It's certainly adversarial to people who don't like it. You can call it petty. That's just petty to call someone petty. Again, but nothing I've seen so far in this would make me believe that this is actually coming from inside the White House. I think this is pure propaganda written by someone who has nothing to do with the White House. Let's move ahead for additional proof of this. From the White House to executive branch departments and agencies, senior officials will privately admit their daily disbelief at the Commander-in-Chief's comments and actions. Most are working to insulate their operations from his whims. Well, this sounds like absolute nonsense again. Senior officials will privately admit their daily disbelief at the Commander-in-Chief's comments and actions. Well, again, this is sort of Nostradamus-like things. Everybody knows in any office you have people who are dissatisfied with this or that. You have personalities that are conflicting all day long. People are always, they have these negative thoughts about leaders, the leadership, and when they're in a position to have to listen to what someone else has to say in a meeting. Well, this is just the kind of crap that goes on everywhere. It's like saying, just pick something out of a horoscope or something like that. Anybody can say this, and it's going to have a measure of truth, but it's overall it's just dumb. Okay, next thing. Meetings with him veer off topic and off the rails. He engages in repetitive rants, and his impulsiveness results in half-baked, ill-informed, and occasionally reckless decisions that have to be walked back. We'll provide an example. Well, you can't provide an example because that would identify you if you really existed, but you don't really exist because you're just a propagandist, leftist liar. Okay, here's a quote that he comes up with next. There is literally no telling whether he might change his mind from one minute to the next. A top official complained to me recently, exasperated by an Oval Office meeting at which the president flip-flopped on a major policy decision he'd made only a week earlier. Again, this sounds to me like throwing a dart at a dartboard instead of something that is actually has some meat to it. There's no reality to that. You should be able to see that and say, well, this is a liar. This isn't true. This does not ring true to me. It rings like somebody trying to twist a screw. Moving ahead. The erratic behavior would be more concerning if it weren't for unsung heroes in and around the White House. Some of his aides have been cast as villains by the media, but in private, they have gone to great lengths to keep bad decisions contained to the West Wing. Oh, though they are clearly not always successful. Oh yeah, those bad decisions. Let's see, what are those bad decisions? You could provide an example here or two, but you really haven't done that. Again, this is sort of just echoing what leftists say on their news programs all day long. It's a narrative that is completely fabricated, and there's not one speck of evidence, no more evidence than Robert Mueller has to carry on his unconstitutional investigation of the President of the United States. Let's move ahead. It may be cold comfort in this chaotic era, but Americans should know that there are adults in the room. Oh, it just makes me feel so good knowing that the kind of people who would write this trash are there standing up for us, American people. We weren't. How can we be responsible enough to elect a leader? We actually showed that we did not elect Hillary Clinton, and that makes us irresponsible and unworthy of being voters in the United States. We allowed Donald Trump to become president. You just got to shake your head and apologize to your neighbors over that. This economy, close to 5% growth, and we all have jobs when millions and millions of people are now working instead of collecting food stamps. But yeah, we're glad that there are adults like this absolute pussy who wrote this piece of trash in there. Yeah, it makes me feel a lot better knowing you exist. Let's move ahead. We fully recognize what is happening, and we are trying to do what's right, even when Donald Trump won't. Yeah. The result is a two-track presidency. Yeah. Trump and you. Yeah, the guy with the multi-billion-dollar business and golf clubs all over the world, and some dick who can't even stand behind his own words. Yeah, it's a two-track presidency. You two are sort of on the same scale there, right? Let's move ahead. Take foreign policy. In public and in private, President Trump shows a preference for autocrats and dictators, such as President Vladimir Putin of Russia and North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, and displays little genuine appreciation for the ties that bind us to allied, like-minded nations. Well, what's a like-minded nation? Canada? Have you ever read Canada's constitution? It reads like a Monty Python sketch. I mean, it's the most idiotic thing you could ever concoct. How is that a like-minded nation? Britain? Are they like-minded? They just want to let as many Muslim military-aged men flood into the country as possible. Are we supposed to be like-minded? I mean, who is it what nations on the earth are like-minded to the United States? Only those which have a constitution which is commensurate with the United States, and that's zero. There are no like-minded nations. There might be nations that we can deal with. We can try to have dealings with certain nations that are mutually beneficial. We can try to work with any nation that we can. We don't want any of these nations to be enemies. We don't want Russia to be enemies. We don't want North Korea to be an enemy if we can avoid it. You know, both of these nations have nuclear weapons, and those are pretty destructive. So we don't want to kowtow to these nations, and I don't think there's any evidence that suggests that Donald Trump has done that. So once again, this is just a bunch of nonsense. Okay, let's move ahead with this condescending tripe from this complete dick. Astute observers have noted, though, that the rest of the administration is operating on another track, one where countries like Russia are called out for meddling and punished accordingly. If it weren't for those meddling countries, Hillary Clinton would be president of the United States. This is just childish and stupid. And where allies around the world are engaged as peers rather than ridiculed as rivals. This is not an adult who is writing this. Okay, what adult doesn't understand that every country in the world tries to meddle in every other country's elections in such a way that will benefit that country? Now, how is it that Russia benefits from Donald Trump being president? It seems to me they were doing quite well when they were dealing with Hillary Clinton. They got a nice pile of our uranium over there and funneled hundreds of millions of dollars into her bank accounts over at the Clinton Crime Family Foundation. Again, this doesn't ring true. This is a narrative that only a evil leftist and stupid leftist would buy into. It's an obvious lie. Nobody who is in the White House, whether they agree with the president in general or not, buys that shit. It's just propaganda. Okay, let's move ahead. On Russia, for instance, the president was reluctant to expel so many of Mr. Putin's spies as punishment for the poisoning of a former Russian spy in Britain. He complained for weeks about senior staff members letting him get boxed into further confrontation with Russia. And he expressed frustration that the United States continued to impose sanctions on a country for its malign behavior. But his national security team knew better. Such actions had to be taken to hold Moscow accountable. Well, first of all, President Trump doesn't seem to me to be the kind of leader who wants to be a dictator. He appoints people that he believes, has reason to believe, have certain strengths, And he is not the kind of leader, and I don't think any great leader wants to be surrounded with yes men. A great leader wants to be surrounded by strong leaders. And those people will often, maybe not often, but certainly on occasion, have strong disagreements. And I would expect that a strong leader will have his own strong views, but on occasion will be influenced, will change his mind based upon the input of advisors that around himself, that he's surrounded himself with. And it seems to me that Donald Trump has exhibited that kind of behavior, and it's led to great success for him and already to success for this country. So what is this propagandist saying here? That his advisors were able to influence him to change his mind on some sanctions for Russia? Big fucking deal. This isn't the work of the so-called deep state. It's the work of the steady state. Well, this is the work of deep shit. This propagandist piece right here. We know what the deep state is. Robert Mueller exists. Rod Rosenberg exists. And yeah, I didn't get his name wrong. I said that on purpose because he's a traitor, in my opinion. These people, well, I don't know if they have what they deserve coming, but I hope they do. This is the deep state. Hillary Clinton is the deep state. The Mueller investigation, unconstitutional on the face. Let's move ahead. Given the instability many witnessed, there were early whispers within the cabinet of invoking the 25th Amendment. Within the cabinet, yeah. Early whispers within CNN and MSNBC 13, which would start a complex process for removing the president. But no one wanted to precipitate a constitutional crisis, as if you had the power to do so. You don't have any evidence to back it up with. Everything that the president has done with regard to this country's economy and with regard to bringing race relations together has been remarkable. He's shown remarkable leadership. You want to talk about the guy's unhinged and erratic. He's a president that's out in front of the people all the time. He's speaking off the cuff in news conferences. He's speaking off the cuff in front of tens of thousands of people at these rallies, and everybody can tell he's far from erratic. Everybody can tell he's far from unhinged. The guy is he's remarkable. We're not sycophants. People who support Trump aren't sycophants. People who supported Obama are complete sycophants. Throughout Trump's campaign and throughout his presidency, people who support him disagree with him often. Throughout the campaign, almost everyone who is a supporter would say something like, well, I don't agree with him on everything. I don't agree with him on this. I don't agree with him on his tariffs. I don't agree with him on this, that, or the other. But overall, I know the guy loves the country, and overall, I know that of the two choices I have, it's night and day. President Trump is going to be a great leader for the country, and even all these never-Trumpers have had to turn around. And you see Glenn Beck wearing a "Make America Great Again" hat. The guy has changed minds. The only minds he hasn't changed are leftist traitors, and the more we draw a contrast between people who love America and people who are not for the freedom of the individual, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, let's move ahead. The bigger concern is not what Mr. Trump has done to the presidency, but rather what we as a nation have allowed him to do to us. We have sunk low with him and allowed our discourse to be stripped of civility. Okay, here's a lovely idea. Civility. Discourse to be stripped of civility. You do realize that in the United States, we have had to go to war to maintain freedom of the individual as a way of life. This is not a way of life that is natural in terms of society. People had to be killed en masse. The Revolutionary War was a bloody business. The Civil War was a bloody business. World War I, World War II, just tens of thousands of just bodies scattered everywhere. Civility isn't what created the United States. Civility isn't what has gotten us the measure of freedom that we enjoy in this country. Civility with leftists is not getting us anywhere. I don't want civility with leftists. I want contrast. I want stark contrast with leftists. I want leftists to understand that everything they do, everything they say, these are fighting words. I don't want to reach across the aisle to a leftist. I want a leftist to be eliminated from my society. There is no place in the society for a leftist. So he's saying, this propagandist, we have sunk low with Donald Trump and allowed our discourse to be stripped of civility. Well, the civility that leftists have shown, that Antifa has shown, that the murderers of police officers have shown, that that's the civility that we really need. Of course, let's move ahead here because this is where this is going. Senator John McCain put it best in his farewell letter. All Americans should heed his words and break free of the tribalism trap. There's so much wrong with that. I need a video just to go into that one sentence. With the high aim of uniting through our shared values and love of this great nation. First of all, John McCain is a wishy-washy piece of shit. And I'm glad he's dead. Gotta say that. Fuck you, John McCain, wherever you are. I don't know if there is a hell or a heaven. Kind of doubt it as such. But John McCain, the guy hated Donald Trump so much that he voted against the repeal of Obamacare. You know, what principles did John McCain have? Reaching across the aisle, as if that's, this guy talked about first principles. What's the principle in that? Compromising and democracy. What does that have to do with anything? I'm concerned about the first principle of freedom of the individual, freedom of association, freedom of speech, not being threatened with murder if I don't pay for social experiments. Senator John McCain didn't exude or any understanding of first principle. The guy was just wishy-washy on everything. What he did in terms of running for presidency was lose. He lost to Barack Obama. He handed it to Barack Obama, who proceeded to trash this country. Let's see. We may no longer have Senator McCain. Well, thank God we no longer have Senator McCain. Did I mention fuck you, McCain? But we will always have his example. A lodestar for restoring honor to public life and our national dialogue. John McCain, a piece of shit. Let's get that out of the way. His service, well, fuck his service. No wonder he got shot down. I don't care about John McCain. And people have already said this phrase, a lodestar, is meant to imply that Pence wrote it. I don't believe it. I don't believe anybody close to the White House wrote this trash. It's too, it reveals itself as propaganda all through it. There's nobody who actually believes the things that are in this letter. These are expositions of narrative. Okay, let's move ahead here. Mr. Trump may fear such honorable men. What is honorable about this? The guy spilled his guts. Now I understand, if you're in a situation like that, who's to say what you would do? And I wouldn't say, if I was in that situation, that I could be more honorable than John McCain was. But he wasn't honorable. He spilled the beans. And he came back. If he had been honorable, even if he had been honorable in that role, and he came back, but what he did after that more than erased any respect I should have for the guy. Just because you put on a uniform and go fight, you can still be a Benedict Arnold. And that's exactly what he was. We should revere these people. No, I don't revere John McCain. I don't have to mince words about that. John McCain was a horrible American. And that's my opinion. And I'm entitled to it. If you don't like it, fuck you. Okay? That's an example of the civility I want to have to people who want to tear down the United States, want to tear down individual liberty. Fuck you. This is, in case you don't know this, YouTube, this is hate speech. I hate leftists with every fiber of my being. I don't want to reach across the aisle to a leftist. If you can see what happened in the 20th century, 100 million dead in Russia and China, Cambodia. If you're aware of, if you're smart enough, have the education to understand what Pol Pot did to a city of 2 million people, Phnom Penh, just march in there with a bunch of child soldiers and force everybody out of the city and just shoot anyone who can't make that march because you have such good ideas about how to run a country. Fuck you, YouTube, and fuck you, Facebook, and fuck you, Twitter, you leftist pieces of shit. How's that for civility? I don't want civility with you. I want war with you. That's what I want with you. Let's move ahead. There's a quiet resistance within the administration of people choosing to put country first. Bullshit. You're a liar. You're trying to destroy the country. But the real difference will be made by everyday citizens rising above politics, reaching across the aisle, and resolving to shed the labels in favor of a single one: Americans. There's not one speck in this entire diatribe of principle. It's an entire, it's just a propaganda piece put out by a propagandist, enemy of the state, the New York Times. And I see no evidence or reason to believe that it did come from within the Trump White House. The language is designed to obfuscate. It is throwing darts at it just attempts to, it's an obvious attempt to fool people. You can tell by the dialogue, you can tell by the language that it understands that it's not going to fool people who know what they're talking about. There's an old episode of Gunsmoke, and it talked about people. You know, some of those were really good, some of them were really bad, but some of the writing was amazing. And there's this one episode where this old guy describes people, and he says there's three kinds of people: the good uns, the bad uns, and the in-betweens. The in-betweens are people, you know, they're the people that we're all trying to influence. Good people don't have to be taught the difference between right and wrong. You know, most of us are the in-betweens. You know, it was very early on for me in my life when I realized the difference. You know, I read philosophy. I read Karl Marx and I read Ayn Rand, and I knew one of them rang true to me. Ayn Rand rings true. Karl Marx reads like an idiot, like an impetuous idiot. But this dialogue, this New York Times op-ed, is designed to try to influence some of the in-betweens who don't really understand this. This is a pure propaganda piece written by a leftist, did not come out of the White House, and to me it's obvious. It should be regarded for what it is, which is a product of the enemy of the state. Thanks for listening.